So we have an interesting panel planned for you. Just to make sure we don't add to the delay, we'll kind of just warm up and get started. I'm going to request my colleagues to walk up, please, and kind of grab a seat here. We'll do a very quick round of introductions. Seated right next to me first would be Gert from Siemens. He's been here for a number of years, very deep insights into what is happening in India and the rest of the world. Seated next to him is Anshu of Amdocs. You've seen Amdocs listed in the award section as well. They won a number of awards this year again. And so he's been a transformation leader here in India. Delighted to have him on the panel. Aruna from Capgemini. She's helped build the Capgemini footprint in India in a very rapid fashion, very insightful observations as to the challenges of growth. We are really privileged to have her. She's come in from the US only this morning, a few hours ago. Thank you, Aruna, for still being here despite that. Ganesh, again, another veteran of our industry. He's played a number of critical roles with respect to Dell, very active in the NASSCOM Executive Council as well. I think what's most fascinating is the way he approached the whole technical support center here and made it a deep kind of an engagement from Dell's perspective. And that led to a number of things happening, including manufacturing for Dell in India. So delighted to have you here, Ganesh. And last but not the least, Ranga, a person close to my heart, techie, turned into now a manager with PayPal, previously with Amazon. And I think his experience represents a lot of what we will see happen in the next 5-10 years, the kind of technology changes and technology leadership that he's engaged with. So I'm going to see if I can go back and sit there. Sitting is easier for me these days because of my injury, and then we'll take it forward from there. Yeah, so we are going to do 3 segments in our panel. We'll, one of the rules that we've tried to establish here is that we don't want to agree with each other. So our expectation is that you're all really, really smart people out there. We want to give you diverse perspectives. And from that, you should choose, you should challenge your own thinking and choose what is really applicable to you. And I think many of us are going to be around even later. And this is a small industry. You can reach out to people and talk to them some more. So we are not looking for homogeneous kind of answer from our panel. Just before we start, can I do a show of hands with your permission? How many of you are actually will call yourself working in an R&D center? All right. And how many of you see yourself working for a quote-unquote product company, whatever definition that you use? All right, so this is helpful because, this helps us understand who we are talking to. We will leave 10-15 minutes in the end for Q&A, so please keep your questions ready there. Just to kick this off, I'll share an anecdote from, I think, 3 years ago. I'm not sure whether it was 3 or 4. Pari, you have to tell me which one it was later. But I was on the stage here. The Confluence session was in Taj, Gardenia. And at that time, I remember there were 600 MNC R&D captives. And I was the NASSCOM product forum chair at that time. And we had just finished a study, actually with Zinnov, to estimate how many product startups were there. And give or take, they were about 600. And at that time, I posed a question for myself and all of you, and saying a few years from now, 3-5 years from now, where do we think disruptive innovation will come from? These 600 MNC captives, and many of them, about 150 of them, had some incubation program going on, or these 600 product startups, who were strapped for money and were really scrappy. And today, as I stand before you, to me, that answer is already in place. Some of it you sensed in Pari's presentation. That answer is clear. That out of the 2 camps, can you guess how many of you think the product startup camp has won? Yeah, it's 2 little hands going up. it has certainly won. From last year, many of us in the industry are saying, we will produce $1 billion, a new company, a new product startup that hits $1 billion in valuation every year out of India. Last year, we declared Zoho to have hit $1 billion. Thankfully, they proved us right. It's a private company. Earlier this year, a very small competitor of theirs was bought by Salesforce, and the tech industry wrote about that the estimated market cap of Zoho is $1.3 billion. This year, we have declared InMobi to have crossed the $1 billion valuation. I won't tell you who the company is next year, but there is a company for next year as well. Now think of it, there were only 4 US-based companies, startups, there were many IPOs that took place. There were only 4 in the product enterprise space that were roughly $1 billion in valuation. So hitting $1 billion in valuation out of India from a startup is not a trivial undertaking. So that is happening. Today, there's a list that floats around. It's called the Potential $100 Million Club. These are companies which will hit $100 million, product companies, only software product companies, that will hit $100 million in valuation in the next 18 months. And there are 17 companies on that list. Not everyone will hit that, but I think 15 of the 17 will. And so you are talking about a pipeline that has developed there that is very significant. I think it took some effort to get there. There's stuff that happened at the company level, stuff that happened at the ecosystem level. And what Pari and Zinnov is trying to accomplish is to put a similar mission in front of us as MNC R&D captives and say, how do we make the orbit shift happen here? How do we look back 4 or 5 years from now and say, you know what, we didn't plateau, but something magical happened, and we took our footprint to the next level. That is really the backstory, the back context, the context for why we are here in this panel. So I will, many of you who have heard me before know I love to talk. So I have to kind of pull myself back and not do much talking, which is why Pari wanted me to be the moderator. And so I'm going to stop talking here and go around, start in this sequence itself that we have, and request each one of you to share your perspective as to what is the challenge that you see in front of the ecosystem, our MNC R&D ecosystem, so that we can go from this plateauing stage that we are at to the next orbit shift. So good.
Talking about the next level of growth, from my point of view, let me first define what I mean by growth. In the past, growth primarily was towards adding manpower, but especially for GICs, the growth, I would say, is limited to some extent. So that means it's no longer about adding manpower, it's primarily about getting more responsibility. And for getting more responsibility, well, who decides in the end whether or not you get more responsibility? It's typically the headquarter, the business units. And to get more responsibility, we need to convince them that we are able to deliver, and convince the headquarters that can be done by showcasing the right competencies. Right competencies, especially in 2 areas. Number 1, technical competencies, and equally important, the domain competencies. And this is something where we need to work on over the next years. We need to come up with programs to improve the technical competencies and the domain competencies. Talking about technical competencies, let me add one anecdote. I recently met a colleague from the IEEE Computer Society, and his name is Stephen Tocke. He's responsible for the certification programs. And Stephen, he said, IT industry is an industry of highly paid amateurs. And, well, is he right? I mean, from my point of view, he's 100% right. Because if you look at it, we have many, many people also in the GIC center who do develop software, but do not have a proper education in terms of software engineering. And this is what we need to focus on. We need to have more engineers. We need to have more architects, come up with programs, educate the people, And then if we showcase the right competencies, also we will grow in terms of responsibility in the years to come.
Very well said. Anshu, what kind of leadership do these specialist roles need? How is it different from what is there today?
First, I'm slightly concerned about the highly paid people in this room. and
highly paid?
Those who believe, raise your hands if you believe you're not highly paid. So, no.
That's an IQ check. We are always underpaid all the time.
I work for a startup.
I work more than I get.
I'm surprised nobody raised their hand.
Nobody. Yeah, I think it's a good day for leaders of the companies that you work for that compensation cycles are just over. So probably that's the reason. I think, first let me just clarify a little bit. I saw a lot of hands go up when we talked about product companies. We are somewhat of a, misnomer. Amdocs, we are a product and services company. And there's a good friend of mine, Brad Fell, who once said that there's no future for software unless it's wrapped in plastic. And what he was trying to say was that either software has to be a platform or software has to be packed with services. So from that perspective, we are a product and services company. And from the product and services point of view, I would say is that the biggest challenge that we see from the growth perspective, and I would frame it slightly differently. Growth has to be tied to company growth. I cannot say that I'm going to be sitting here and the only KPI that I am measured on is how many people can I add. That's a lose-lose equation. Bad for the company and bad for us in India as well. So as we talk about plateau, I believe that the plateauing is tied to the plateauing of the revenue growth of some of the companies that we work with. So the question becomes, if we want to architect the next level of growth, then we've got to figure out how we can contribute to the top line growth of the companies that we represent. And in that frame, and we'll come back in round 2 and round 3, I'll keep it short to say that in our experience, that the 2 areas that we believe that we need to contribute from the growth perspective. One is that we've got to demonstrate the depth of domain knowledge and domain capability that is relevant for the context where our customers work. So I'm, Amdocs is an Israeli American, I'm an Indian American, Israeli. So if you think about Israel, their innovation is directed towards the developed market. So they have the understanding of the context of what it takes to be successful in the developed market. And I believe that we will have to develop that understanding of the context. That's one. And the second thing I would say is fundamental, foundational leadership capabilities. I think we as a country have gaps. Deficiency is probably the right word, maybe politically incorrect. But we have gaps in core leadership capabilities that we need to invest on to really help drive that next level of growth. So in summary, domain, leadership.
So Aruna, before I hand it to you, I'm going to build on his Israel comment. Israel has 37,000 people working in its high-tech industry. All of you here represent 220,000 people, right? So you are already 5 times the size of the entire Israeli industry. And yet those 37,000 people have created more market value by market cap, right, than our 2 million people working in the Indian services industry.
Yes, and I was thinking of examples, as you were saying. Waze is an example of 4 weeks ago, over $1 billion in terms of valuation.
Exactly. Yes. And so they've created more value. If you put Infosys, Wipro, Cognizant, you take the market cap of all the companies, listed and unlisted, in the IT industry, it's estimated to be between 300 to 500 billion. And they have created more value than that, 37,000 people. Now, if India has to really make that magic happen, that's the responsibility that you guys have within you, right? So what will it take for this team to become like Israel? How would you frame, Aruna, that challenge for them, for the purpose of this conversation?
So I just want to take off from where Anshu left. He said this room must be full of highly paid people. I also think there's one more definition that I put to it, which is most architects believe they're God's gift to mankind, okay? Which is, I hope you all agree with that one. So
God is an architect, right?
and God is an architect. Yeah. Okay, so let me try and define what is the vision or the direction rather than, what is the problem. Let me take an analogy. When you think of cars, okay, BMW, Audi, all the nice German cars that are here, you think of German engineering. You think of German design, you think German precision. You don't think where it was developed. For all you know, it's assembled in Malaysia, Kuala Lumpur. You think of many other consumer products designed in the Netherlands, designed in Germany, manufactured in Malaysia or China. What I'm saying is, at the end of the day, it's not important where it is developed. Okay? For me, the dream that I have, that where we need to get to in India, is where is the design? And that is really the differentiator. Nobody remembers where it is developed. Okay? I believe where we are today as a company, as an industry, is we are very proud of our development heritage. We are very proud of our services capability. But at the end of the day, that's not differentiating enough. And what we really, if we have to put a dream and say that's our aspiration, it's really to say this is software that is designed in India. Okay, we might eventually go get it developed in India or in Bangladesh or Philippines or wherever, but the tag that we need to work towards is its applications, its infrastructure, whatever else that is developed. It is designed in India. Okay? If you keep that in mind, then you'll start thinking about it is not the bottom layer that is important. I don't want to offend people, but at the end of the day, a person who writes embedded code 1 year out of college is the same as any other guy anywhere else. Okay? It's very hard to distinguish in the first 2-3 years of your career. Okay? And I'd like to say one Java programmer is the same as another one C++ same as another one. What really distinguishes is that what is the difference that you bring to the table beyond that one. So truly then we start to distinguish between customer centricity, your ability to understand and design or differentiate based on what your customer needs, how agile you are, and so on. So I think we should really focus on what is it that will get us to that designed in India, and that's where really then you'll start to get the value or the IP that you're talking about. And Israel today is the number 2 country in terms of venture capital investment after Silicon Valley. So that's really where we need to be able to get to.
Thank you. Good morning. I think this is already my favorite conference because, one, I didn't have to travel as much from US to get here. I only traveled 15 minutes, which is exciting. Second is it's interesting to see that irrespective of whether the dollar is 60 or 50, the conference rooms are always packed. So it's I don't know whether about you, but I feel really good. I framed the problem in a simple framework, right? There are a lot of words being used. I think every R&D center in India goes through 3 phases. The question is how soon you can get to the 3rd phase. The first phase is a phase I call as I think you do. All the thinking happens corporate headquarters. Only the doing happens here, right? That is where we all start, and that is where we go through. The length of period we live in this phase 1 varies from country to country, but that is where everybody starts. The second thinking is we will think, but we will allow you to think within a boundary. Right? You can do within that boundary. So which basically means you don't have any full product development responsibility. You don't have a full product coming here. You can do this piece of the thinking, right? That's the second phase. We all go through the second phase. The third phase is, as Aruna pointed out, the thinking and doing happens in India, right? That is the 3 phases every R&D center goes through. The problem we have today is that every company which comes in India goes through the 3 phases sequentially. Irrespective of people who have figured out how to get to the 3rd phase or 2nd phase, everybody goes through the same cycle. And the number of people who are getting stuck in phase 1 and phase 2, not able to break into phase 3 of where the thinking and doing happens in India is huge, right? And that is where we got to figure out how to bake this into 2 and 3. You won't be able to do at the country level. You won't be able to do at the company level. Can we take a product? Can we take a domain and put more and more people into this phase 3 of MNC Center? If we can figure out what it takes to get there, I think the problem can be solved. I think that's where how I frame the problem.
Yeah.
And Ranga, if I was to build on that by saying to get to phase 3, what in your mind are the key specialist roles that we got to grow at a rapid pace, much more rapid pace than what we've done in the past?
I think, let me start by saying I'm a very visual person, and so I have to relate to something that is visual. So I think in my mind, I think I frame this question as, imagine a slider. On the left side of the slider, you have, you have the low value chain, if you may, and then I give you the slider, the ability for you to move to the right, which is basically, the high value opportunities, the high value challenges. To me, it's a journey. So I think the question you're asking me is, what are the sets of qualities you have that would enable a company to contribute a value to the right side, right? I'm not too, I think India Inc., if you may. India is a country and not necessarily, and it's a combination of companies. And each of these companies have their value at some slider point. So I think for us to get I think most companies like Amazon I worked in and other companies earlier, what they've done is they made the platform a level playing field. They made the technical competence a level playing field. And I think each company has to physically evaluate where they are in the value chain and physically what it takes to go maybe in the 3 stages to the right. And maybe, our biggest challenges right now is we are trying to intellectualize the big crisis, if you may, looming crisis. Unless there is a physicality to it, unless there is something that is saying inherently people will lose jobs if you don't do these things, I think there will not be the impetus to actually push the slide further up. So yeah, that's where I stand.
Yeah, but I want to pin you down a little further. Saying this physicality, this tangible thing. What is it? I mean, in your mind, what is different between the, let's say, technical architect role models that we have today and what we need? Do we have the role models that we need in the future? Or is there something that is changing in our ecosystem that requires, is it just more of the current people that we have at the architecture level or at the product manager level? Or is that itself a template that needs to be different from what it is today?
I think we're setting the wrong expectations. Yesterday, we talked a little bit about the need for having a portfolio. I think what we're trying to do is we're trying to change the profile of people doing certain types of roles and trying to push them towards the right end. And I think one of my colleagues yesterday pointed out, right, it's a clever management of portfolio. The skill sets required for high value and, if you may, the high-tech jobs are completely different. And organizations need to, recognize that. And I think I can talk at length about how Amazon does it. I think our tech companies do it. And I think right now it is really a challenge. I don't think we are in a position where we can claim that. I can give you some examples. I think in Seattle we have about on an average, every department we have the concept called a principal engineer. A principal engineer is uber architect. He can design and he can run a business on his own by his vision and all that. In India, I think we have one principal engineer across the board in Amazon. And I think partly it's because maybe there's a leadership crisis in actually defining that maybe we're not grooming enough principals, and maybe there's a crisis of opportunity where the principals are not able to establish value locally. So yeah, it's not an easy problem to solve, so yeah.
Can I have another show of hands? How many of you have moved to India? You were earlier working somewhere else in Finland or US or Australia. You have work experience in a country outside of India in the space that you are in right now. How many of you are returnees?
That's a good number.
Right. So we filled the problem, and I see Ram sitting here. Ram Narayan, one of the passionate people trying to fix the product management issue in the ecosystem, and also the person behind IPMA. A lot of product management gaps have been filled by people coming back. How many of you believe that next year, in the current environment that you see, your friends, there are fewer people asking you to come back than was the case 2 years ago? Basically what I'm asking you, is the pressure of coming back going up, or is the pressure going down? How many of you feel that there are more people willing to come back to India than was the case earlier? Very few. Actually, there is evidence available that in the recent past, the willingness of people to come back has gone away. And we are actually for the first time seeing reverse migration happen. Lots of people are going back so I feel, at least in the short term,
The re-reverse migration.
Reverse migration. In the short term, I feel that that the engine that drove the creation of specialist roles here, which is what you saw yourself a little while back, was the return of specialists to India, is not going to be working for us for the next 2 years. And so therefore, in the next go-round, I want to pose a different question to you. You are all leaders in your own organization. In the absence of the former engine disappearing, right? Now we have to do the hard work to create our own specialists locally, because we can't rely on people coming back, right? And if that is the case, what is the advice that you can share with the leaders here that they should be thinking about and doing, so that in the next 2 years they follow that strategy and still get good outcomes in creating specialist roles out of India? Good, with you first.
Well, at Siemens, what we started about 4 years ago, we came up with specific programs, specifically for the technology topic. We took a program from IEEE based on the software engineering body of knowledge and designed a program. It's about 10 days. It's called Focus Foundation Curriculum on Software Engineers, and this is in principle the basis that we lay in terms of technical competences. So more or less each and everybody in the organization with a certain experience has to undergo this training. And on top of this, we have specialized programs for a variety of different topics: quality, requirements engineering, testing, project management, and so on. And as the employees progress in their career, they undergo those specialized trainings. And in this way, we are able to overcome, let's say, a lack or a deficiency in their education in terms of technology. And we ensure to some extent that we don't have highly paid amateurs, but at least, I mean, whether or not highly paid is a different question, but at least that we have not amateurs, but professional software engineers in our organization. That is one track, technology, and in the same way we have a specific track for domain competence. Domain competences that are relevant for Siemens in healthcare, energy, industry, and infrastructure-related topics. And also in the same way, like people have to undergo the trainings in technology, they have to undergo the respective trainings in the area they work in. And in this way, by establishing those own trainings, we make sure that we have the right competences in our organization.
Oh, okay, well, I think from what I would say is there's two things, again, sticking to those themes about domain or context and leadership. I think the two key things from our point of view is that, so if people are not returning back, we've got to take our talent exposed to the context and domain of where our customers are. So one of the key things that we do is to try to get people to sit on customer sites, sit on data centers which we run for our customers, so get greater exposure to the customer context and understand the business as well as the customer does. So that's one thing one has to do, and I don't think one will get past that or get to the next inflection point. One has to break through the plateau, one has to do that. So that is one, is trying to address the product management domain context, and that needs to be solved. And the other thing I would say on that domain context is something that I saw in Pari's slide. I think we should not just limit ourselves to thinking in terms of the developed market customers. You saw the examples of Amul and some of the other examples where there is the applicability of the capabilities that have been developed in R&D centers and apply them to the Indian context, which is a context we understand better. And we don't have to go to San Jose for that context to be developed. So on the domain and product management aspects, I would say that one, send your employees and your talent to closer to the customer, get them to experience, And in doing that, you also address second part, which is the leadership aspects, which is understanding the sense of urgency, ownership, accountability. I think these are not just terms and logos, and you hear people talk about them, but we've got to internalize what it means. What are those behaviors that we demonstrate? For us, we support the largest telecom companies in the world, from Pune and Gurgaon, and 1 second down for an AT&T network could be millions of dollars of business for AT&T, and all that system is managed by our teams here. So from that point of view, what are those behavioral traits that you demonstrate? And investing, it's not something that we are born with, because we're not exposed to that context. So investment in, and I was happy that we won an award yesterday around the leadership, having a structured best-in-class program to build the leadership capability. So identifying, for us, it's 3 areas: ownership and accountability, having more global leaders from India across all levels. Across all levels. It's not just me or someone who is a direct report, but in addition to that, we need across all levels. And then emotional connect is something that we feel is another area that kind of all comes together in a package to address some of the things that you talked about.
So immersion is a very important theme in your...
Yes. We are engineers. We are a bit too left brain. Right. We are input output. I gave you this, you gave me that. No, this is not right, fix it, come back again. No, this is what are you doing?
So structured educations, immersion, Aruna, any new idea that you can throw at the audience here that they should pick up on?
Yeah, let me focus more on the softer skill side. So one of the issues we found is most of these guys, the architects or the designers that you need, very often are what they call as single contributors. Okay? They need to be able to work independently. It's not that they are managing, they could manage large teams, but sometimes they are not. Okay? And whereas the typical thinking in India is, how many people am I managing? How big is my team? And if somebody says, look, I'm managing 5 designers versus another guy who's managing 100, they tend to feel a little bit low. So I think we had to first address this issue of, it's not the size of the team that you matter, but the complexity of what you are managing. And to get that into people, which meant that really defining a completely different career track and a measurement system for these kinds of product management roles, and to recognize that individual contribution. So, I mean, the role of a chief programmer is there in many of the product companies, which is not so common here, to create those kinds of roles and to encourage, and you have to really create an independent career track from the normal people for that kind of thing. And which also means that, and the second requirement is that it is by definition a global role. You cannot have very senior people in a product management environment or those designers, architects, and say that, look, your work is limited to what you do in India. By definition, it has to be global. Okay? So those 2 things in addition to what everybody else said.
Yeah, I'm only wondering, we should have our own version of Big Bang.
Big Bang Theory.
Right? I work with a colleague of mine who comes from the marketing world. And he pointed this out to me, which is to do with this whole cultural construct. He says, look, you can only make fun of strong people, right? I mean, on television, you can't make fun of weak people. So Big Bang Theory works because, at least in the US, a construct has been created that these geeky, socially awkward people are really, really powerful people. So we can afford to make fun of them, right? And so therefore it's become okay to be a geeky, socially awkward, individual contributor type of a person. We haven't had that in India, because in India our mindset is still about span of control, as you pointed
Absolutely.
out. And hopefully, we can work on changing that mindset.
And it's a little more, even more than span of control, it's also about how you measure the guys. You can't measure them by standard KPIs that you have in any other environment for a normal developer then.
And the measurement of the guys or gals also extends to marriage. Means how many employees do you have, and you are a good match if you have X number of employees versus X is equal to 1 or 2, right?
So a completely different reward system or a social system that recognizes the new specialist talent that is going to be essential. Ganesh, any thoughts?
Yeah, I haven't run an R&D center in India. I ran all of services and sales. So my only qualification to give Gyan today is I have a US patent. But I'll tell you 3 things which I have seen work. One is, to the extent that your company has products which are customized for the local market or emerging market, allow your people to actively participate and think. I mean, the greatest example for me is not from our industry. Think of the spicy fries from McDonald's, right? You know, they give you a bag, they give you a spicy powder, peri-peri powder, you put the regular French fries and you shake it up and you get spicy fries. I'm assuming this came up from somebody from India, but imagine, right, they've taken the core product, added a very little improvement, they make the customer do all the work, and voila, we got a great product for the Indian market. So, you know, if you have an opportunity for you to design, actively encourage your people to do so. Not all companies have that opportunity, but to the extent that the global products are used by your local customers, make sure that your R&D engineers are actually talking to real customers who are using their products. Understand what works in that product, what it doesn't, because then your engineers will have more knowledge about what adds to the top line than the people sitting in headquarters and dreaming up these products, right? The third thing is allow your people to think and innovate and really celebrate the geeky nature of our work, right? I mean, when in Dell, we also measured the R&D center on how many people we have doubled. Our R&D capacity in India has doubled in the last 3 years. But every time Michael comes, what we are now beginning to show is how many invention disclosures are happening out of our centers. Our invention disclosure on average has gone up 3 times, more than the number of people we have added. Our US patents, which are actually filed and recognized, have gone more than the invention disclosures. The inventor of the year for Dell this year is from India. So what we are now beginning to celebrate is you are allowed to think. And we are going to celebrate people who think than people who are doing. If you can do these 3 simple things, we can build the ecosystem in our company. We can build the expertise in our company.
Very good. Again, the same question.
Yeah.
More specialists. You are a returnee. There are few people following you back into India.
Absolutely.
So what can you do to fix that problem?
I think the first, to me, the first challenge I think is when you think local before thinking global, I think the problem gets a little fuzzy, and I think polarizing the problem is part of the issue. I think deep understanding of the global product. I think we should look at opportunities by which and really push hard for total code ownership or total internalize the global product. There is. I think we tend to jump the gun and say, you know what, I want to localize a product even before I understand the global experience. We have to stop that sort of a tendency first. And then, like he said, the opportunities will happen. There are 1.2 billion people who are going to need payments, or any other opportunity is going to happen. So any company that is not going to leverage the local expertise on the ground here, I think is a little lopsided. So
there are lots of leaders here, right? People in leadership roles. What is it that they can do? For example, on changing the reward system, having an inventor of the year from India, is a signal, powerful cultural signal for lots of people to say, hey, maybe it's okay for me not to have lots of people reporting to me, but it's okay for me to be an inventor, right? So, because I get to meet my chairman who comes and so on and so forth. Now, these are tangible things the company is doing. What would you suggest that they do, right, to be able to groom more specialists who are operating at the global level, within their own...
Absolutely, more of the same. I think I totally agree, because there is this severe Indian social pressure to sort of be a people manager within 5 years. You're supposed to do that, or else your wife is going to frown upon you, or a title, and a whole bunch of other things are there. We are trying to, and we cannot solve this problem. The problem is not so simple, right? And so, overnight, 20 years, imagine this. I think if you were to tell your parents for the last 20 years I've been an individual contributor, they think it is irresponsible, right? I think we have to concede the fact that we have cultural pushes, and it's not easy to move the needle there in terms of expectations. I think only we can incentivize certain behaviors and maybe pay the guys more, and allow more of the same, and also allow for a participation of the global on the global product. Push really hard. Figure out ways by which you're transporting people, teleporting people, if you may, into the thinking process, if you may, much earlier on, and all those things are behaviors we can actually do.
I don't need to pin you down, but I'm going to ask you a question again.
Certainly.
If there was an ask that you have from your global stakeholders, what would that be? Where, for example, if you had an ask with respect to immersion, saying, hey, we want to do something in India that is special, because that is immersion. We want to put extra money and send people off for 6 months for immersion.
Got it.
I know we don't do that in our home location, but we need to do that here. That's a specific ask that somebody has to have. There may be a specific ask, like Gert mentioned, we want to run a very structured education program. Now, I know you may not need to do that in the home country, but we need to do it here. What would be this one ask that you would advise people to make from their global stakeholders so that they are better off being able to groom more specialists from within than what they have been able to do in the past?
I would ask for, if the company truly believes it's a global company, I would ask part of the thought leadership to operate out of India. And, and that will be a challenge, because I think the very fact that the yes or no questions to that, let's say, for example, if your CTO is sitting here for the next 6 months, I think he gets a sense of the perspective, he gets a sense of the opportunities here, and if you can manage that, and key leaders and have, home them here for some time, and then they become our, if you may, our patrons, and that's something we can try.
Understood. Let's go into another go around here, and then we'll definitely open up for questions. It'll be very important to get your questions in. The go around that I want to have is, there is so much the firm can do on its own, right? But there's got to be an ecosystem that supports this journey of the firm to be now able to groom maybe 2 times, 3 times more specialists than they have been able to do in the past. So what would be your ask? Rather than make it very intangible, I would frame it. What is your ask from Zinnov? What is your ask from IPMA, the Indian Product Management Association, right? There is this Institute of Product Leadership. What is your ask from Institute of Product Leadership? What is it that you want them to do that will amplify your own firm level efforts so that you get much better outcomes, 2 times better outcomes than what you would have thought on your own?
Well, coming back to the initial statement, IT industry finally paid amateurs. And by the way, this quote was not targeted on India. That was, let's say, the global IT industry. And I mentioned how we try to overcome this with our training program. So what I would expect from an ecosystem, the reason why we are doing this in the company is because the kind of talent we are getting from the educational institutes especially do not have the competencies which we require. And if you look at it, this is a phenomenon that is not only typical for India. This is also, again, a global phenomenon. I don't know if you have any idea about, if you look at educational institutes in the US, there are probably thousands of colleges, universities, where you can get a degree in computer science. Do you have any idea how many institutes are there where you can get a degree, a bachelor or master, not in computer science? Because what we need are not computer scientists, but software engineers. So how many institutes are there where you can get a master or bachelor in software engineering? Any idea, any guess? Hundreds? It's about 15, 1-5. If you look at Germany, similarly, there are about hundreds of universities where you get a degree in computer science, and roughly a handful of institutes where you get a master or bachelor in software engineering. I don't know the exact figures in India, but I would guess that it's definitely similar, so there won't be more than 3, 4, 5 institutes at all where you get an education specifically for software engineering. And from my point of view, what the IT industry needs, it's not computer scientists, it's software engineers. And this is where I would expect a stronger support, a focus of the scientific community, of the educational institutes in generating software engineers. And that could also be a differentiator for India globally, because if we in India have, let's say, 75% of our people really software engineers, we would be much, much better than the colleagues in the US or in Germany or anywhere else in the world, and in that way probably also be in a position to deliver better quality at faster speed, and in this way get also more responsibility and grow in the terms of responsibilities in our centers.
Very interesting. I like to share an anecdote. which kind of builds on this, brings this home. I think this continuing education is really very important, right? Because midstream, I think Aruna pointed out, 1 year, a person who is embedded software development 1 year out of college is probably similar rest of the world. But what happens 5 years out, 10 years out, right? And that's really where the specialist roles come in. And very often going through an intervention of continuing education at that point is very interesting. So I want to share an anecdote with you. Now, if they can do it, you can do it too. So that's my point. Now, who is they? I am an investor in 2 companies. Both till recently, they're on sabbatical, were professors in IIT Bombay. Both are tech companies, Icon Solutions and Sedimac. And in both cases, they went for a course to do with entrepreneurship. And 6 months, 8 months, something clicked in their mind, and they said, you know what, we're going to become entrepreneurs. Now, as far as I know, there are lots of students turning into entrepreneurs, but there are very few professors turning into entrepreneurs, right? So there, a kind of an injection of continuing education, exposure, going out, mixing with people for only a week or 2 weeks can make a very big shift in what they want to accomplish and become good at doing something, a new kind of a specialist than what they were. So I think this is very powerful. I love what you're suggesting, because I think our ecosystem has to become capable of providing these interventions so that at the mid-course, mid-career level, people are able to go out and get a different flavor and then build themselves from that point onwards. So that's a very good point. Anshu, what would be...
Well, I think you asked what can a party do and what folks like Party can do. On a lighter note, I think if individual contributors are not getting married, Party can help with that. He can set up mechanisms for matchmaking. But that aside, I think there's a lot of contribution which, the product management forums that you talked about, is to bring in an ecosystem. Why is Silicon Valley Silicon Valley? It's just one Silicon Valley. Boston has tried this thing, North Carolina has tried stuff, Austin has tried other things, but it's still Silicon Valley. So what is it, that unique ecosystem which has been created? I think we have the ingredients of creating that in the India level. And maybe in India, I would say Bangalore and Pune, being selfish about Pune slightly. I think you can create that ecosystem with the product management folks. For example, they're doing some good work talking about product management fundamentals. Can they layer on top of that industry vertical fundamentals? How does a telecom company work? How does a retail company work? And overlaying those aspects which are missing in our country. And why is it missing? It's just not a coincidence. Our country started growing 20 years ago. And it started growing at a reasonably rapid rate. People were jumping from one job to the other. You never got the opportunity to understand. State Bank of India, for me, when I was studying, was 10 a.m. open, close at 2 p.m., open at 4:30, close at 6. And they did you a favor by accepting your money. So, I didn't have money, but dad's money. So what I'm saying is that ecosystem contribution can be done through platforms like this.
So what's missing?
Yeah.
So, for example, I would say Great Places to Work played a big role because it forced people to say, is my place a great place to work or not, right?
Yes.
Now, today, Zinnov gives out these awards that are again forcing people to evaluate themselves and say, am I a technical
What's missing
leader?
is
Pradeep Kulkarni here, one of the award winners on the technical side? I wanted to call him out because
missing is sharing of that.
So,
sharing is missing.
What is missing?
That's the sharing. Sharing of the ideas is missing.
Okay.
So I'll give you an example, and Tarun will validate that. On the second aspect, which I've been harping about, is leadership. So what we do in Pune, again, is to say that we have something called a Leaders to Leaders Forum. We invite all IT companies in Pune to come to join us when we invite someone like a Harsha Bogle or a badminton player or somebody to just talk experiential leadership experiences to be shared with the younger workforce. We are a young country. We have a younger workforce. We cannot have the same level of leadership that we expect in Silicon Valley again. So I think sharing is what is missing, and this is where folks like Zinnov can come in and play an important role.
Very good point.
I think first for half of the things that needs to be done are within organizations, and I would say roughly half is outside within the ecosystem. And there, for me, the first priority would be to get the foundations right. Okay? When I say foundations right, it's about, if we can find a way together to influence the academic institution, it has to start at that level to say that, look, it's not about doing what I'm told to do, but it's okay to think, the way Ganesh said it. So it's really about changing that mindset, and it needs to come at the education level, absolutely, because, those are the formative years. You can brainwash people later on, but if you don't do it right in those last 4 years, you don't do it.
What the career path should be gets formulated that there and then, and it should be, you should be able to shape and influence that at the ecosystem level.
At the ecosystem level, yeah. But I don't even dare say it should be about their career path. It's about how they approach the academics itself. Like, are you encouraged to think? Are you encouraged to do something new? Are there enough labs in academic institutions? Okay, that may be a tall order right now, but I think we'll have to really fundamentally shape the way we operate. I mean, you look at, we talked about Silicon Valley, the big difference is how Stanford works out there. You look at Stanford, Berkeley, or those institutes, and the way that you are encouraged to think differently. Okay? And that's, I think, fundamentally what we need to change together. And I don't think it's very different. It's very difficult.
I wish that was true. I have sense it is. It is quite difficult. But Ganesh, part of our enemy in these specialist roles, which I think Aruna is also alluding to, is this thinking that quantity will produce quality on its own. And we have not seen that happen at all, especially with engineering education. That has certainly not happened. And we are going down that path with entrepreneurs again. If you have quantity of entrepreneurs, we'll have high quality entrepreneurs. And that is not happening in entrepreneurship as well. So our enemy seems to be this mindset, that quantity somehow produces quality, right? So what is it that the ecosystem should do to kill that mindset? So that, building on what Aruna is saying, we don't go down that wrong path, which we have the danger of doing right now.
If anything, we have quantity. If you look at the ecosystem broadly, we just have to pick the quality from the quantity of people we have. I see the tendency today in the Indian ecosystem, believe it or not, the Indian ecosystem is going to be IT services, BPM, R&D centers, and product companies all together. Glorifying one part of the ecosystem over the other actually tends to people hiring only from within that ecosystem. Every time I look at an R&D job, everybody is from Juniper or Cisco or NetApp or Dell, and they just move around within the companies. And across the ecosystem, within your companies, the similar ecosystem exists. You have IT services, you have back office. We really need to pick up the quality people who can think and innovate, who can be the architects from the broader ecosystem of IT services, BPM, and product companies, not glorify one part of the ecosystem over the other. Then there is a talent migration which is happening only one way. We really want the talent migration to happen in multiple directions from one group to the other. I would say the leaders like Sharad and Pari, you should actually glorify all parts of our ecosystem, because they are all dependent on each other. It's not that the product ecosystem is better than the R&D ecosystem. Everything is dependent on each other.
So I'm going to put you,
sure.
in a spot again. Pavan Goenka of Mahindra says that I need only 30 people to design my car. Mm-hmm. I need 3,000 people to manufacture the car. And I need 30,000 people to support my cars in the field, because they come back for service. And he says, look, if my market share doubles, I don't think my 30,000 people will double, because my goal is to make sure that my car needs service only half as frequently as before, right? Now, if that is the case, if our BPM is the service part of the car, manufacturing is the IT services part of the car, and building the car is the product part of the car, do you really believe in what Ganesh is saying? That you should bring people from the service leaders and put them to design the car? Or
the service guys know much more about the customers than the people sitting in the room and designing.
They're all serving the same customers, right? What would be your take on that? And what should be the ecosystem's view on this?
You put me on the spot here. So.
You can disagree.
The customer is not buying an R&D person, right? Just as long as that's clear.
Yes.
How many people have seen the designer who built your car? How many people have seen the service guy who services your car? Okay, I rest my case.
It's all because of the problems the R&D people created, right?
No, I think I'll skip this challenge. I think we should not take polar positions of trying to glorify one end of the spectrum. Again, I go back to the spectrum and the other end of the spectrum. But I think coming back to your problem, I think we have to find passion on the ground. I think we have to find, I think people get into the startup culture primarily because they feel like they're going to become millionaires overnight. I think India is, because of its deep affinity towards anything economic, there is an element that we are not driven by passion. So we got to celebrate geekdom. We got to make sure that there is a certain element of sexiness to the whole aspect of technology. There is sexiness to the whole aspect of contributing globally, and all those things need to be done in a scale that you can manage, or else you'll end up with the same thing, because he's like he points out, there is more money on the ground on the server side of the sector. Why do I need to stand in one corner doing things when nobody even knows what I'm doing? And coming back to one more point I want to make, it's funny. I was reading an article where Boston, which is considered in the charts there, was the second largest number of people, and they were competing, and there was a write-up about how they are finding it difficult in losing talent to Silicon Valley. So it's not a problem unique to just...
I think the level 4 leaders that Pari talked about at the top,
right.
You can see in the last 18 months, many of them have become entrepreneurs.
Right.
Because they say, look, if I can convince my global stakeholders and do something interesting, I might as well work for myself.
Exactly. Right?
So I think that is a risk. I would also say, I think Professor Rishi Krishnan here, is on a mission to demolish an argument that if you go after the 30 service engineers to extract 30 designers, it's not going to happen. The Indian mindset is Jugaad will allow us, there are enough Jugaadus among those 30,000 so that you can pick the 30 designers who will build the car. And he is showing with lots of data that is actually not happening in India, right? So the Jugaadus that are not becoming specialist car designers, and they're having to groom specialist car designers as specialist car designers. And so I gently feel that while I am all in favor of what you are saying, treat everybody equal, I feel we have to remain focused, and I'll end on that note, on growing the specialist as a mission by itself, and not letting that happen as a byproduct of finding just talented Jugaadu people who will grow magically themselves into specialist roles. Is not going to happen by magic. It hasn't happened in our ecosystem in the last 5 years, and it's not going to happen in the next 5 years, unless we do something special to make it happen. And that onus is on all of us here, collectively. So with that, we have a few minutes. Let's open it up for questions. The first question.
You have only 1 minute.
We have only, can we take only one? Can we take two? If you, okay, two. Yeah. So,
He's negotiating now.
Maybe 3.
Maybe 3, yeah.
all right. So there's a question there. Please go ahead. Why don't you speak out your question? We'll repeat it.
First of all, thank you for the great insightful questions, and for all of you really provoking responses. I just had one point that I thought we missed out, and I want to maybe ask a pretty debatable question. We talked about how can we make the individual contributors better, and Aruna talked about creating a separate track. But then one still point that got missed out was, what is the amount of investment that we as leaders do to promote that? What is the time share that we spend with these individual contributors? You know, if there is a senior executive or a leader, how much of time does he or she spend with these individual contributors as opposed to people managers?
And you are implying that if they do that, that's a good thing.
Well, I think that is the start, right? You know, how are we showing our commitment? From where you are sitting, there are very different things that we may be able to see that people don't see. If my CEO spends 90% of time with people managers, I am obviously going to think that that's the place where I want to be.
Yeah, so I would flip that question a little bit based on my experience. One of my mentors was one of the chief architects at Lucent, John Culzer, a Bell Labs fellow. I think the mentorship I got from him was more valuable than I would have got had I got it from the Lucent CEO. So I would flip that. Are we creating enough? Because specialists need to be mentored by other specialists, not general managers. Are we creating enough linkages, global linkages between a specialist in India who needs mentoring and a specialist in Germany who's already good at it, or in US or wherever. Are we doing enough of that in our own companies, or in the ecosystem? What would be your answer to that?
Well, I think that definitely depends on the individual. I mean, from my point of view, even as a people manager, you still have to understand the technology.
Right.
So that means you should spend a certain amount of the time with the people who really do the work, that you are, let's say, at a level that you can still understand what is happening from a technical point of view. And you, of course, main job probably will be people management. But at least a certain percentage you still have to spend to understand technology and what is happening in the organization.
So in your case, for example, however, that being said, people managers are here, general managers are here, but you have probably deeper architects in Germany than you have deeper architects in India. Is there enough mentoring that is happening cross-border today?
From my point of view, at least, I can only speak for Siemens, definitely there is.
Yes, so is that true generally for the industry? What is your reading on that? Because I think his question is, are we doing enough of that? My suspicion is the answer to that is no. I don't know if anybody would like to.
I think his question was a bit more on, we as leaders, how much of time are we spending to promote and indicate to people that individual contributor tracks are important? And the next level of that is how does German engineers collaborate with Indian engineers and so on. And I don't believe we are doing enough, but we are doing.
Right.
So we're starting to do a little bit.
So let's take the next question. I would argue, since I'm the moderator, I have the privilege of having the last word on this. I feel less is better than more. Because true mentorship only works for people who followed that path before. If I'm a product manager, I would love to, you will change my mindset if I'm mentored by another product manager. And the leaders, with very few exceptions, I see Ram sitting here, who's a product manager who's turned a center head. Most center heads haven't come from a specialist track background. And if they haven't, there is a general manager trying to give gyan to a specialist. And very often they don't even know what they don't know to be able to give that gyan properly. So I want to emphasize that if at all, the first intervention we make is world-class specialists grooming the promising specialists. And if you don't have world-class specialists, then find them inside your organization and get them to do that here. General management grooming of a specialist is not been very powerful in any case. Any other question? Yes. I see lots of hands there. Yes, please. In the third row. That's the last question.
Okay, we just heard a lot about it, and there's one aspect which I think is missing. How much of the Indian culture is impacting the ability of Indians to innovate? I'll cite an example. We generally don't throw away things and buy new things. We generally want to fix what we have. So we already have inbuilt within us the services culture. Now, and does innovation, meaning only to do within IT, can help? Are we looking at innovation happening in the manufacturing sector? So probably, if you look at that, then maybe you might get good innovators from there into IT, and it does not necessarily mean have to be innovation in IT.
I don't think we should, put a cultural twist to our inability to innovate. I don't think that's true, because you could see in your own companies, the people are sitting in Palo Alto or Austin and doing the invention and thinking is all of Indian origin. So I really don't think the innovation is a true capability of any culture or not.
I think any thoughts on this?
Sure.
Yeah, I don't think there's a cultural dimension to it, but what is, however, impacting it is the ecosystem, which you're right, has an impact in India. So the same guys, when they go out, have the ability to, flourish, whereas here they somehow feel hindered. So it's not cultural, but it's an ecosystem.
Yeah, and it's risk and failure, right? Yeah. So would you hire somebody who, failed on a startup? In Silicon Valley, people will be lining up to hire you. But here you might be having doubts about that. So I think I agree with that. Now it's an ecosystem that we have created, and we've got to change that, just like the individual contributor, perceptions that we've created.
I just want to add something there, okay? In the US, if somebody takes a break for 1 year just to have, think through what he wants to do, it's very, very accepted. Yes. In India, if somebody takes a break for 2 months, you're suspicious about what he did during that time. It's not acceptable. Right. It's not acceptable. Okay, so these are ecosystem things. It has to do with the way we hire, the way we think. Okay.
And also, the funny thing is, I've noticed this: the same individual on the way back to India let's say for example, would have taken a 1-year hiatus in US, but he comes back to India, the sense of, maybe I'll lose my job in 2 months or whatever because the people. So I think it's the DNA that is common, but I think the ecosystem is enabling or disabling. So we got to have a sense of, building the right ecosystem, and the onus is on corporations to do that. I think companies within companies.
So thank you all for a wonderful discussion. Thank you for being a patient panel. Thank you.